Hello to everyone who is listening in Israel or even Iran. I hope that everyone is staying safe, and we are all praying for you and for a swift and decisive end to this war, and that we should see peace, real, lasting peace. In this week's Torah portion is called Shelach, and it's basically divided into two basic parts. You have the first half, less than half, that talks about the spies. Moses sends spies into the land of Israel to see how they're going to conquer the land because God promised them they're going to take the land of Israel. And Moses sends spies to scout out and see how it's going to happen. Then you have the second part of the Torah portion, which discusses various mitzvot, things like tzitzit and Shabbat, various sacrifices, and so on. So this sort of begs the question: why call the whole Torah portion Shelach after the incident of the spies, when a good chunk of the Torah portion is not talking about that at all? So the basic answer that you might say is that, look, the first major word of the Torah portion gets the title, right? So here it says Shelach, L'chol Nashim, sent out spies, so therefore, it's called Shelach. But for this, there's two answers, actually. One is, this isn't necessarily true. We see in the book of Genesis that we have two sections that start out Ela Toldot, so-and-so. These are the generations of so-and-so. Now, the first one is with Noah in the flood, right? Ela Toldot Noach, these are the generations of Noah. And then, much later, it says Ela Toldot Yitzchak, these are the generations of Yitzchak, of Isaac. And which one gets the word, the title Toldot? It's actually the later one with Yitzchak. And when it comes to Noach, we call it Noach. We don't call it Toldot. So it's not necessarily just based on the first word. If that were the case, Noach would be called Toldot, and Toldot would be called Yitzchak. So that's number one. Number two is that even if it was the case that we just base it off of the first word in the Torah portion, we don't believe that anything is by happenstance, right? Coincidence is just an 11-letter name of God, like I like to say. And therefore, even if it's just because it happens to be the first word of the Torah portion, that has a spiritual source in the heavens. And so we still have to answer the question, what is the reasoning behind calling the entire Torah portion after the spies? Especially because the spies is it's an incident in history. It happened. They're going to Israel. Moses sends out spies. It's a one-time deal. Whereas the mitzvot that are mentioned towards the end of the Torah portion, that's eternal. That's for us even nowadays. So that seems to be the more significant aspect of the Torah portion that we should be naming it after. So what was the sin of the spies? What happened? Right? Everyone knows. If you don't know, I'll tell you, that the spies go in and they see how big the people are and how strong the cities are and how difficult it's going to be to take the land. And they come back with a bad report about how it's really scary and horrible and difficult and the people are big giants and it's going to be very hard. That's not their sin. They're just telling the truth. They went to scout the land. They're supposed to see what they're supposed to do. And they're coming back saying, hey, man, this is going to be a slog. It's not going to be easy. Their sin was the conclusion that they drew from that. Their conclusion was, therefore, it's too hard. We can't do it. It's not going to happen. Forget it. Let's just go back, whatever. This is not going to be doable. That was not their job. Moses didn't say to spy out the land to see if we can take it. He said spy out the land to see how we can take it. Their job was not to draw any conclusions as to whether or not God can do something. God can do it. Don't worry. Okay? Now, there is a general principle that we don't rely on miracles. Okay? We try to do our best, see which natural means we're able to accomplish something, and then we go about and do it. Now, maybe it's not going to work, and naturally, and so therefore, okay, so God's going to have to make it happen. I feel the same way every time I get my bank statement. I don't know how it's going to work. God's going to have to figure it out. I'm sure many of you feel the same way. So the spy's mistake here is saying, "Oh, God can't do it." You know, rely on a miracle. In fact, they say, it says that what's the difference between nature and a miracle is just frequency, right? God's doing miracles for us all the time. Okay, so if God wants to do a miracle, He can do a miracle. If by natural means it's not going to work out, so God can make it happen. And God promised that we're going to take the land of Israel. So therefore, that's going to happen, regardless of whether that's going to happen by natural means or by supernatural means. So this is a fundamental principle with which we have to look at the mitzvot, right? The mitzvot that are given at the end of the parsha, that are eternal, that are for us nowadays, right? We shouldn't look around and say, it's too hard. Shabbat, I can't do. It's too hard. Kosher, can't do. I don't have the means for charity, so it's just not going to happen. God gave a commandment for these things. By God giving the commandment, that is God telling you, this is possible, this is going to happen. So you look at your natural situation and see whether or not it can happen naturally. And if not, if it's really, really not possible through natural means, which I find a little bit of a dubious argument, but if not, then don't worry. God's going to make sure that you have the means. So the whole Torah portion, including and especially the incident of the spies, and gives us this message, right? That God is giving us the ability to perform the commandments with which He has given us. And that is something that we should bear in mind constantly. Shabbat Shalom.